After 1 year on Airbnb, I'm going to be spilling all of my secrets on how to become and stay an Airbnb superhost and how to get more 5-star ratings. Hello, my name is Laura and I have been an Airbnb host officially for a year. I have 4 different listings. They're all each a little bit different, and I'm going to go over what I have learned over my 1 year on Airbnb as well as VRBO, the good, the bad, the ugly, and what I have done differently as a result of my negative reviews and what I keep doing as a result of my positive reviews, because they haven't all been negative. In fact, an overwhelming majority of my reviews have been highly positive. I have more than 150 reviews and fewer than 10% are less than 5 stars, but that definitely matters because my rating as a host is not a 5-star host, which is ultimately what you want to achieve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some background as to what the review on Airbnb is, why it matters, how it is calculated. Okay, so the first thing that is important to keep in mind is that Airbnb reviews come in 2 different parts. The first is the rating, the numerical rating, and there are 6 different categories that guests can rate you on a scale from 1 star, which is the lowest, and 5 star, which is the highest. The first is cleanliness. How clean and inviting was your space? Accuracy. Relative to the pictures, how accurate was your place represented? Was everything shown in the pictures available to guests? Check-in. How did guests access your place? Was it easy? Was it safe? Communication. Did the host respond proactively? And were they friendly and helpful? Location, this one should be obvious, but relative to closeness to amenities, was it safe? Did it feel good for guests to be there? All of those things are going to factor into your location rating. Value. And essentially, this is just asking guests whether it was worth the price that they paid to stay at your place. And then you'll get an overall rating. Now, you would think that the overall rating would be a combination of the various individual categories, but guests actually give you an overall rating as a separate rating. So that means even if guests gave you 5 stars on all of the subcategories, if they gave you 4 stars in overall, you're not going to be getting 5 stars. And one thing that I will say when it comes to the rating and how it's calculated is that Airbnb is not at all transparent as to how it actually calculates your overall rating, because I've done the math myself. It is not a simple average. It's definitely a weighted average, but they don't give you the weights. So you're not quite sure exactly how important each of the subcategories are. Now, Airbnb has said in the past that cleanliness and value really matter, but again, they haven't said how much. So how a rating is calculated is a bit of a mystery. Now, the next portion of a guest rating is the narrative. So guests will write feedback describing their experience with your listing, and this is really free form. Now, the important thing to mention is that Airbnb does lay some ground rules. They have a policy for reviews, and both guests and hosts have to follow that. So when they are writing their narrative response, it's really important that it is accurate and it is based on a legitimate stay. And it actually has to relate to their experience at your property. So if they write a lot of information that had nothing to do with your actual listing, then that could be grounds for removal per Airbnb's policy. They're also not allowed to use profanity. They're not allowed to give out personal information. They're really supposed to keep their written reviews based on their experience. All right, so now that you know that Airbnb reviews are both numerical and narrative components of a whole, let's get into what my actual reviews said after I posted more than 150 people on Airbnb for the last year. The overwhelming majority of my reviews have been 5-star. However, not all of them have been. 11 of my reviews as of the time of this video have been less than 5 stars. And I'm gonna go over for each property, how many of those properties received less than 5 stars, generally what was the feedback, and what I did as a result of that feedback. Okay, so my my burst unit, it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment, and it was the very first listing that I put up back in January of 2022. That has received 3 reviews that were less than 5 stars. And what guests have said, the beds weren't that comfortable, the steps leading up to the apartment as well as inside of the apartment were really steep, and one guest said that the apartment wasn't clean. So when it came to the beds, what I have done for all of my listings is put in place mattress pads, because I actually agree the beds really aren't that comfortable. My partner and I stayed in one of our listings a few months back, and we slept on the beds and we both found it uncomfortable. At this point, given the expense to completely replace a mattress, we're not going to be replacing them anytime soon, but certainly the mattress that I bought, I'm probably not going to be buying that again, and I will likely just go to a local mattress store to get a proper mattress. What we currently have is a memory foam pad mattress, and it was supposed to be super comfortable, but I think what I did wrong was I bought the wrong thickness of mattress. So it was recommended that I buy the 8-inch, and I accidentally bought the 10-inch, which makes it a much firmer mattress. So people who like firm mattresses, great, but people who don't, they hate that mattress. So definitely rethinking the use of that mattress. But in the meantime, mattress pads have helped, and I haven't gotten any negative reviews since we put that mattress pad in place. So I think that's kind of resolved the issue. Okay, my next listing, this is a 3-bed, 1-bath home near my 2-bed, 2-bath apartment. And that has also gotten 3 reviews that have been less than 5 stars. And the overwhelming feedback on that listing is that it is very noisy. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that the home is more than 100 years old, way before people were soundproofing homes when they built them, before those materials even existed. So part of it is just the fact that it's a 100-year-old home. And there's really not much that we can do about the sound between the homes because of the way that the home is built. You could certainly maybe add some more drywall to provide a little bit more of a sound buffer, but that's probably an expense that the homeowner is not going to want to do that. That's a listing that we property manage. The other thing about that home is that the joists, so the things that support the floor, the beams that support the floor, are shared between the 2 homes. And I do think that that's part of where the sound carry comes from. And that's something that we could never do something about. So whether being able to soundproof it is actually realistic, I actually doubt. So what we have done instead is I got earplugs for all of the bedrooms, also got some white noise machines to help cancel out the sound. And I also listed very clearly and several times in the listing description that the sound carries from the home next door. It doesn't matter though, because guests don't always read that, so we still get complaints or at least mentions about the noise in our reviews. Okay, next, it's a duplex, a 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartment that is top down. And again, there, the overwhelming feedback we have gotten has been noise, but from the neighborhood. Now, the thing about this particular home is that it is much closer to the downtown area and much closer to the train station. And there's a commuter train that leaves that station starting at I think 5 in the morning, Monday through Friday. And there is absolutely nothing that we can do about that. But what we did do was, again, add the earplugs and the white noise machines. The other piece of feedback that we get about those 2 homes is that the homes are small. And I certainly advertise that in the listing copy, but in particular, people don't like how small the shower is. And again, this is really not something that we can do anything about because the size is what it is. We just are very clear in the listing description. Another challenge that we had early on with that particular duplex was the parking. It is a one-way street, and there is only street parking on one side of the street, and there is street sweeping that happens. And the configuration of the street, there are essentially 3 sides to the street, and each side has a different day and time when it is street swept and you can't park there. And so in the beginning, we had this map of color coding the sides of the street saying, don't park here these days and these times. And in my automated messaging, I would send out notes the night before to say, hey, if you're parked on this place at this time, please move. And it was just too complicated. Most guests got it and they were fine with it, but There were a couple who just like didn't like it at all. And it just led us to go ahead and pay for off-site parking. There's a parking lot right behind the building that is owned by a neighbor, and they rent out some of those spots at $75 per month. So we just rented one for each unit, and that has solved the parking issue. We get no complaints about it. There was one person who said it was really inconveniently located, especially on a rainy day, and they happened to arrive on a rainy day. So I think in general we have solved that issue. But I will say that in general, that listing in particular gets the most rave reviews. And so that's actually a great transition to talk about what I have learned from the positive reviews. Now, before we get into the positive reviews, it would be amazing if you could hit the like button. This helps to push my content out to new viewers and help others grow their Airbnb business. Like I said at the beginning of the video, out of over 150 stays, 90% of those guests have rated our place 5 stars across the board, which is fantastic. That tells us that overwhelmingly we are doing a great job and our listings are clean, they are accurate, people find them to be a good value, and they're just great places to stay. And I would say what I have learned from my positive reviews is to really lean into those things that guests say that they like. For example, guests really love the location of all of my listings. It is walkable to downtown, is in a really nice neighborhood, and is convenient to all of the amenities that my town has to offer. So I play that up in my listing description. I talk about where it is, all of the things that you are close to, distances to various amenities around town and outside of town. Another thing that guests really love about each of our homes is the decor. And I can't say enough about how important it is to furnish and decorate your listings so that they look incredible. Remember, as Airbnb hosts, we are in the business of selling JPEGs. So if your pictures are going to look great, that means they have to take images of things that are beautiful. So really invest in your decor, and you don't have to spend a ton of money. I will link some videos here that I have done on Airbnb decor and where you can find great things. And in fact, in the description box down below, I have links to all of my favorite items to furnish your Airbnb. So I have done all of that thinking for you, and it's absolutely free to you. Okay, the next thing that guests consistently say, and even in my less than 5-star reviews, pretty much everyone says that the communication that I provide to them is excellent. And for this, I really cannot say enough how important it is that as an Airbnb host, you have your telephone with your Airbnb app on all of the time. Be sure to turn on your ringer and so that you get notified right away when a guest messages. It is incredibly rare that a guest has to wait more than 5 minutes for me to get back to them. And I would say, and I have no data to back this up, but I would venture to say that 99% of the time I am back to them within a minute. And that's because I've got my phone on me and I know when guests reach out, because you never know, they could be experiencing a problem, they could need help, they may want a recommendation for something. So it's really important to be very timely in responding to your guests. And I will link here a video that I have done on my automated messaging for guests. At every step of the way, from confirmation, check-in, checking in on their stay, and checking out, I am proactively sending them messages to let them know what to expect. An additional thing I've done, and I'm happy to do another video on this, so I have a really great guidebook that has suggestions for where to eat, where to shop, where to go, and it includes all the information that guests would need to plan their stay in my location. So if that is something you want to see, let me know down below. Another thing that guests really love are the amenities. We provide plenty of towels, cooking utensils, everything that a guest could need to have a really comfortable stay, we provide. And that's because the reason that people are picking an Airbnb over a hotel is because it's a home and it provides an experience like a home. People can cook full meals, they can stay a long time and be comfortable because they have everything that they need. So that is another thing that I highly recommend, is invest in having ample amenities and high quality amenities, because the last thing that you want to have happen is for something to break when a guest is using it. So don't cheap out here. And finally, guests love how accurate my places are. So the pictures reflect everything that is in my homes, and the listing copy describes everything. So I talk about the good and the bad of my places. People know that there are steps to access some of my homes. People know that they're going to hear noise from the neighbor or from the neighborhood. Now, that's not to say that they're always reading it. That is certainly one thing that I would love to be able to solve, is how to get people to actually really pay attention to everything that is in a listing. But I have done my due diligence and provided that information proactively to guests, and that reflects in my reviews because for the most part, they all say that they are very accurate. So overall, out of more than 150 stays, what is my rating as a host, and am I a super host? I, as a host, rank at a 4.89. which is not too shabby. I would love for it to be higher, but I acknowledge that there are some issues about my listings that guests don't like. And frankly, there's nothing that I can do about them besides be proactive about what is there and be transparent about it. And out of all of the 150 reviews that I've received, how many of them exactly have been 5-star? 93.8. Overall, I would love for that to also be higher, but 93.8 I think is not bad. So what I have learned in my journey so far of being an Airbnb host is that Airbnb guests expect quality, and you really have to give that to them. So if you are someone who wants to become an Airbnb host, the number one piece of advice that I would give to you at this point in your journey is to be very discerning about the type of property that you take on and decide to list on Airbnb. Whether you decide to do arbitrage or you're buying a home, think about those things. Location. Is it close to amenities? Is it in a quiet neighborhood? What are the neighbors like? Are the neighbors going to welcome an Airbnb? Because the thing that you really don't control is what the neighbors do and say to your guests, or, to the city. They may complain. So you'll need to think about what type of neighbors you are going to have and how that might impact your guests' experience. So don't be too hasty to take on any property. Be really discerning and make sure that it is going to allow you to put your best foot forward as an Airbnb host. Okay, so that's it. After 1 year on Airbnb, those are my reviews. This is how I've responded to them, and hopefully I've given you some lessons learned as you continue on in your journey to become a successful Airbnb host. I hope that you found this helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.